Joker Folie Deux is a sequel film about the clown prince of crime meeting the love of his life while locked up. It's got serious flair, but it feels pretty patchy overall. Let's talk about it. This movie takes place 2 years after the first one. We follow Arthur Fleck, who's locked away in Arkham Asylum for his string of murders. He joins the music program there where he meets Lee, played by Lady Gaga, who's a fan of his after seeing him kill Murray Franklin on live television. The two of them bond over their traumas in mutual taste and dark humor, and she provides Arthur support leading up to his trial, where he could either get off with an insanity plea or face the maximum sentence. This movie is mostly about Arthur battling between overcoming the Joker persona inside of him and succumbing to his dark side. Arthur is being told that the man who committed those crimes isn't him in an attempt to compartmentalize the Joker persona in his head. They're going for the split personality excuse to try and save him, and that's the recurring theme throughout the movie. Arthur is battling between making the self-serving decisions to play by the rules and embracing the person he really is underneath. He's got his lawyer on one shoulder telling him that he's not the Joker, and then Lee on the other telling him that he is by validating his worldview. Disregarding the problematic mental health depictions for now, this would be an interesting premise for the film if we were in on trying to solve the mystery, but we're not. We know there's no split personality because we watched the first movie, so that being the movie's main point of intrigue is kind of underwhelming. Perhaps it would have been more interesting here if he was actually showing explicit symptoms, but he isn't. The biggest standout of the movie is the spectacle. A mix of good cinematography, production design, and good editing and color grading give this movie the same visual appeal as the first film, but of course in this movie it's a little bit more extravagant by giving us a handful of colorfully produced musical numbers. Which leads me to the elephant in the room. When news first dropped that this movie was going to be a jukebox musical, pretty much everyone was up in arms. I'm not gonna lie, I felt like Arthur Fleck. I felt very alone in being seemingly the only person who didn't totally hate that idea. I'm not gonna say that I was like, yes, that is the obvious next direction they need to take with this sequel. All signs point to it being a musical. Certainly not, but that's not to say that it couldn't have worked as a musical. With so much chatter about comic book movies being repetitive and needing to break the mold, I didn't hate the idea of having one as a musical/romance film. In theory, that idea could have worked for these characters. The problem is that it's split between being a musical and a courtroom drama and sort of a prison drama, so it just feels stretched thin between all these subgenres. There's a lot of tension that Arthur has at Arkham around an upcoming competency hearing in addition to the upcoming trial. During this time, the movie sort of feels like a prison drama. It hasn't graduated to the courtroom yet, and we're left wondering how it's going to transition. Then the movie turns into a court drama, and this is when it actually started to get pretty entertaining. I was really digging it here. There were some pretty interesting court scenes. Some of them are dramatic and captivating, others have some interesting revelations, and some of them are pretty fun. He does some obligatory Joker monologuing, which is fun, assuming that you can suspend your disbelief in how simple and naive the movie's narrative is. But all throughout the movie, there are occasional musical numbers that lyrically speak to what's going on, but they just don't add anything to what was already said. They kind of just bog the movie down. Granted, some of them were pretty extravagant. I really actually did like the last big one, but every single one leading up to that just felt like an intermission. They just felt like substitutes for Arthur and Lee building romantic chemistry. That's probably the movie's biggest shortcoming. It just doesn't give us a big enough reason to root for them. This sequel had the opportunity to do a lot of things and go a lot of directions, and they went the direction of making it a Joker and Harley romance film at its core. Therefore, the romance should not be haphazardly built. It's the one thing that they can't get wrong with that premise established, and they still somehow did. Their entire relationship is built upon a single encounter where they relate to one another on their history of bad behavior. There is no further development that leads up to their romance. They are now just in an Arkham Asylum situationship after one conversation. And there are other problems with this. I'm not trying to make this review about painting this movie problematic because, going from the first movie to this one, we knew it probably would be. But I'm not really in the business of saying, no, do not see this movie solely for insert regressive reason here. That's usually not me. But I still want to address some of those problems because that might be you. No judgment either way. I'm just here to review the movie. The problem with their fast-tracked romance is that it feels like it's hinging on us suspending our disbelief in how expedited and unrealistic it feels by us simply thinking, oh, well, they're mentally ill, so it works. It's not great. The only other problem in this territory unique to this movie is the false implication that romance is the solution for people struggling with mental illness. Otherwise, I could go on about its depictions of mental illness, but it is comparable to the first movie, so I'll leave it at that. So for a sequel, this movie does not do the first one justice. If anything, that first one is impacted by this movie's roller coaster of a third act, and I don't mean a fun roller coaster. This movie felt like it had a clear direction to go in with a world of creative options that would get it there, and then it went somewhere else. To avoid spoilers, I will simply say that where it went left the movie feeling very confused. I felt like a kid in the car with my mother who is driving me somewhere as a surprise, and I'm like very certain that it's Disneyland. But then she just drives past the exit to Disneyland and takes me to a museum. So to summarize how I felt that last half hour leading up to the very end, I felt like, yeah, going to Disneyland, we're going to Disneyland, there's the Disneyland, to Disney, yeah, what, no, what, come on, what, no, like actually, no. Thanks, Mom. So my hopes for this movie were high, but my expectations were lower, since the first movie was not made with the intention of having a sequel. My biggest hope going into this was that as a Batman fan, I could at least bask in the glory of his nemesis fully fleshed out, but I was still left hanging on seeing the true clown prince of crime. Even realizing the first movie's flaws, I still enjoyed it for the most part, but there is still that Batman fan in me recognizing that Todd Phillips' Joker just isn't the Joker at all. I can turn off the Batman fan switch in my head on behalf of enjoying these movies, but when it comes time to make a review and the switch is back on, I'm not gonna not mention that he still doesn't feel like the Joker. In the same vein, Harley Quinn in this movie is not the Harley Quinn that we know and love. Neither of them are the sick and twisted characters that captured our inner edgelords. I was hoping to see them evolve into the twisted and zany monsters that they've traditionally been depicted as, but they just feel very small in these depictions. Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga are both fantastic playing these characters. When given the assignment, they both brought their A game. The problem is the assignment. They are not written and directed to become the unhinged villains that we know and love. But of course, in this movie, the Joker, in a way, still does what the character is generally known for doing. He reveals the worst in people. He's revealed how bad society is, along with underfunded social services and the exploitative entertainment industry, though not without issues with the execution. Throughout the character's publication history, he has constantly revealed the worst in us by showing us an evil, sick and twisted monster who leaves us saying, I want to see more of him. And here he unmasks the evil intentions in the justice system, corrupt mental health institutions, and his fans and supporters who relish in his statements about society. He still does those Joker-esque things, but he still doesn't really feel like the Joker. So I wish I could say better things about this movie, but despite having good visual appeal, it just unfortunately feels disjointed and uninteresting. This movie is not terrible by any means, but it is still very lacking. If you don't mind it being a musical and you just liked the vibe of the first movie, then you might get something out of this one. But if you were already concerned about this movie, if you were already not digging the idea of it, then your concerns are valid. You probably won't like it. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my review of A Different Man.